Hello, this is Vision Denial. My name is Sam, and this is Clearing Vision MSI 2022. For those who are new, I have watched every single playoff game from all of the competing regions, yes, including that one. In this show, we explore all of the days of different things that have happened during MSI so far. A couple of things. Sorry, this video is probably a little later than it would usually be on a weekend. The power went out in a tornado-like storm for some reason. Other things to note, a lot of shakeups have happened, some expected results, some unexpected results. We should temper all expectations, it seems. And by that, I mean I've been completely wrong on the approach of what has happened recently. But it happens. International tournaments tend to bring out a lot of different, unexpected things on, usually. Who we expect to win doesn't always line up. Right? And so that doesn't mean that it won't happen. But today, we've gotten to see a lot more of how things actually tend to line up. And even though the current standings is not super reflective of what the end result might be, it is notable based off of how some of the teams have been playing. What do I mean by that? Well, let's just take a look at the couple of games we've got going. So let's watch our first game here. We've got G2 Esports versus Evil Geniuses. Evil Geniuses really had us thinking they'd get a win this time. They had the right steps, focusing parts of the map that they needed to get for the win conditions. They even found a few team fights opportunities that got them full control of the map, soul point, and a solid avenue to end the game. But the inability to balloon the lead, coupled with the team getting caught out in awkward positions, led G2 to finding easy avenues to return into the game. What is it? You give an inch and then G2 just takes a mile. This is what happens after just one mistake by G2. Easily the most efficient team at capitalizing on mistakes from their opponents and turning that into proactive steps to balloon their new leads that they garnered. This is good because if G2 were just winning off of mistakes and mistakes alone, it would be sort of questionable how good they actually are, or if every other team was just kind of like fumbling through. But no. This is a proactive team through and throughout. But they haven't shown anything of the case that would indicate that they're just a punishing team. However, they do really lean in onto their abilities to choke vision and snowball leads that close out the game consistently. So let's take a look at the gold graph here to show what I mean. Right? On the spot over here, you can tell right off the bat that at around the 13-minute mark, Evil Geniuses catches out and holds superb control of the game. And it's not a huge lead, but they bring it back 5,000 gold in their favor. And then G2 take over on a situation that really shouldn't have been the case around the Baron. Takes no time for them to really equalize the gold and just run with it and ending the game. And gold graphs like these are really good to look at because, and honestly, if it wasn't for this particular type of situation, it would be hard to tell that Evil Geniuses did in fact hold a position with a win condition. They were close to getting 4 Hextech soul, but it was denied. G2 win the game from that. Let's take a look at our next game. We've got the LPL Royal Never Give Up versus the PCS Paris Saint-Germain Talons. And this was much slower than it needed to be out of the Royals. At some point, when you have a 10k lead against a team that has shown very little attempt of some sort of comeback, you should use that to push down 2 lanes, 1-4 style, and win handedly. But instead, we go for just another round of 4 minutes of waiting for the next Baron and extend the time 5 to 6 minutes. Safe play is one thing, indecisive play is a totally other situation. And speaking of indecisive, though, Talons didn't show any commitment to a win condition this game. Some focus on neutral, some on unified, some on Hanabi, but nothing committed to ensure that the attention goes anywhere consistently, leading to situations where the Royals could passively farm and avoid having to play an early game at all. I'm really hoping to see the Talons show some sort of controlled gameplay from start to finish with coordinated efforts, but does not look like it'll be during this tournament in any way. Take a look at the gold graph real quick. And over here you can tell like it's very slow to build. And it starts really pushing up by the time that the 11 to 12 minute mark hits, which is around the time the mid to late game situation goes through, and the Royals usually kick up around that time. So like that entire time, the Talons had an opportunity to really kick into high gear anything at all that could have garnered them an avenue of victory. But it just doesn't happen. Nowhere, no how do we see anything that could indicate the Talons had like a game plan of some sort. The Royals on their part, again, it is such a slow game. At the 20, they do balloon the lead like fairly well, but they're already at 10K by the time the 26-minute mark hits, and they continue to add way more gold lead from that, and so they don't lose anything. They continue to balloon, but they didn't need to end this game in 2 Barons. Like, it was unnecessary. Let's take a look at the next game. We got the LCK's T1 versus the VCS Saigon Buffalos. I would say, this is how you close out an 11K lead. But the Buffaloes threw themselves at the situation so often that it's hard to tell if this would have been a proactive play from T1 or only the reactive punish play by them. Now, given how quickly they balloon leads, I would lean towards the former more than the latter. The Buffaloes are showing some very nice proactive play around vision and especially early game in an attempt to catch off T1, but the inconsistent execution and the skill difference across the board does not help. This game looked like a classic T1 game, and we'll have to see how they fare against the Royals to see if they can solidify a second place for the moment. While the Buffaloes should be commended on the proactive approach they had, instead of wasting time slowly losing out on more gold for an impossible defense. Attack earlier when the goal difference isn't as high, and T1 have a very readable vision play. I just wish they would double down on the bot side of the map a little bit more. Let's take a look at the goal graph here. And I say this looks like a typical T1 game because this is, like, again, one of the fastest games of the tournament, or at least one of the fastest games of the Rumble stage. And, like, it's 14K at 22 minutes. This is fairly standard across the board. They don't get first blood. They give up the first 2 dragons. They get both heralds, and they win the game off of the first bear. This is prototypical how they dominated the entirety of the LCK. And I'm just hoping that T1 showed this kind of consistency further in, but some of the proactive play that the Buffaloes showed, and a lot of the ways that the Buffaloes also found avenues for flanks and solid engages, show a lot of the weaknesses from vision play or like over-aggressive attitudes that T1 have had in this tournament and just overall across the season at this point. We'll just have to see if T1 can show at least more consistency than what they've gotten at this point. Let's take a look at the next game here. We got the PCS's Paris Saint-Germain Talons versus LCS's Evil Geniuses. This is one of the least efficient sets of Barons out of Evil Geniuses. But given the nature of the game, patience was definitely key in this particular scenario. There was never a point in the game where PSG had full control of the tempo, something that Evil Geniuses navigated super well and approached that lead with incredible vision and neutral setups to get the Drake win condition. I do think that Evil Geniuses' timid and patient play would have been better if they could passively balloon some of the gold, but given the fight that solidified the game for them, I don't think it really mattered. I would have preferred it, but I don't think it mattered in this game. I bring it up, though, because holding control of a lead for a long time and ballooning it stakes the difference between a game that a team can wait for a mistake or are forced to make a mistake. The Talons, for their part, tried to find mistakes where they could, but the lack of proactivity and the safe play from Evil Geniuses backfired on them immensely, allowing for an easy win to come through for the Geniuses. Take a look at the gold graph here. And just mostly taking a look at the situation here, the gold hits 6K or 7K by the 24-minute mark. There is at no point a huge lead that Evil Geniuses hold. They get the vast majority of all the Drakes. They lose a couple of the Heralds, but they don't gain much gold out of it from the Talons. And at no point does it feel like the Geniuses had any reason to doubt that they weren't in full control of the game. Honestly, given the fact that the Talons got the 2 Heralds and first turret, I would have expected them to have a lot more proactivity from this. But honestly, it's kind of disappointing to still see that they're not fully in, their head is not fully in the game so far. At this rate, they're going to be slowly losing out their opportunity for the 4th seed into the knockout stage. The Geniuses, on their part, however, if they keep up this consistent nature, they're not going to be able to contest much against the top 3, but they will have a solid chance at showing that they are in 4th and a lot more opportunity to grow and adapt from it. Let's take a look at our next game here. We got the LPLs, RNG versus the LCKs, T1, and I'm honestly baffled, all right? Incredibly baffled at the play that T1 showed today. Credit where it's due, right? The mid to late game macro from RNG is much stronger. The Royals show a lot more consistent, better vision and neutral approach. On top of it, they absorbed what they could have potentially been T1's early dominance very well, couching out the numerous mistakes out of them, whilst T1, for their part, kept hold of the lead despite a lot of their mistakes, and this shows a lot of how they're very efficient at keeping gold, especially early into the game, and finding macro choices to do so, and their individual leads are there. But they fully understand where their needs are in terms of getting their win conditions going. But please, someone tell me, why the fuck, all right? I wrote heck and I don't even care. Why the fuck is owner in the top side of the map when just clearing minions for some reason? Why is it Zeus that's there, right? They could have sent Zeus topside and had 4 go to the Drake, get Soul, and honestly, I'm pretty sure T1 wins the game from there. They have stronger teamfight presence. A Hextech Drake would have done it. But holy fuck, this is an absolute blunder of a nightmare. And instead they just lose that chance, and in a fight later, the Royals have a bread and butter situation where late game team fighting and macro choices just win them the game, and now T1 is tied for 3rd place with Evil Geniuses at this current moment. They'll break that tiebreaker tomorrow, but they're tied with them nonetheless. Take a look at the gold lead. Let's take a look at it. All right, you see this right here? The Royals here, on a back and forth basis, regularly find ways to nullify, neutralize, and equalize 2K leads on a consistent basis that T1 get almost immediately back. And then they have this baffling Baron at 21 minutes. I don't understand what they're trying to attempt here. It's very rusty. And like they lose. You can tell immediately the second that the Royals gain a gold lead, like literally just 100 in the late game, they run rampant with it. And it doesn't need to be that way. T1 had full access to Seoul. And instead, it's just a nightmare. It's just a breeding ground for nonsense. Let's take a look at the last game of the day. We got the VCS's Saigon Buffalo versus the LEC's G2. And this is a cool game. It was a super interesting draft out of the Buffaloes that probably would have been better without the Vayne. Please stop picking Vayne. Every team should never pick Vayne for the future ever. But it's hard to tell really if the Vayne pick would have been anything at all, given how hard Jankos had just steamrolled the early game. It's such a massive lead early. The Buffaloes showed glimpses of good setup early game, but could not properly execute on it, as they would keep trading either evenly or down on the map as the win conditions for G2 just keep moving the hype train along. Like they're really building up a lot of hype. And so G2 on their part take the early lead and roll with it, never letting go of the tempo of the game. They both hold their win condition up and also nullify the win conditions out of the Buffaloes, giving no chance out of them to come back from the game at any point. Turning this into one of the fastest games of the Rumble stage, tying with how T1 played earlier against the same very team. And this also tends to it dashes a lot of the hopes for the Buffaloes to qualify to the next stage of the game, or next stage of the tournament, just a little bit more, as G2 puts a stamp on the situation, saying they are now the favorites of the tournament. They are the go-to to beat, like hands down at this point. They have, I believe, just the Talons to face off in the end of the last round robin. But we'll talk about that later. Let's take a look at the gold graph here. And there's a lot to commend out of the Buffaloes, honestly. Like, they never grab a lead to begin with in any way, shape, or form. But that's not the point here, right? The G2 had a huge lead on Jankos alone, and yet nowhere is that reflected into the gold lead until the 13-minute mark, where things start to really go down. And even then, it's not until the 17-minute mark where G2 say, all right, enough is enough, and then they start hammering in their lead and pressure to win the game. And this is the part where you can start seeing that Taki keeps getting blown out, but not necessarily because he's caught out of place, just because they're so far ahead. The duo between Jankos and Caps takes everything from the Buffaloes. Those two alone were navigating the 5-man from the Buffaloes easily. And so it's really hard because Flackhead felt invisible this game. Doesn't matter. The rest of G2 is just saying, all right, here we go. Time to just casually move forward and end the game right as we take the Baron and go off, right? The little dip going up is them fooling around. And so, this isn't the fastest game of the Rumble stage, but it's definitely there, showing that, G2 aren't going to just, hold off on the early game and then beat them later. They're really showing that this is the flexible team and the team to beat. And let's actually talk about this. During my entire road to MSI series, and even up until recently, maybe even I would say yesterday to today, I was utterly convinced that T1 had the win from their first play. There was nothing that anybody else was doing that was playing the way that they did, and as convincingly. And yet, here we are. A lot of the teams have caught on to the machinations of T1 and have shown that they don't play late game. They play early game and hope to win very quickly, and that they tend to take a lot of shortcuts because of it, and usually teams don't punish it because the skill gap between the players usually is fairly big. So what happens when the player skill gap shrinks a little bit, and that it, like, I don't know what that means for the rest of the LCK particularly, but like we see here that once the gap in skill shrinks between the Royals and G2, it doesn't hold up as a very solid and consistent play out of them. They're showing their mistakes in terms of inconsistent vision. They got great vision denial, but not great vision control. Their late game macro choices aren't holding up as well as their early game macro choices. And as the games get longer and longer, T1's ability to really like hammer in their ability to win the game gets more and more questionable. And G2 on their part, going from like a fairly like, can we hope that like Cap stays consistent while the rest of the map shows up, to now every lane has some sort of flexible motif to them. This has been a very surprising, genuinely surprising and happy moment to see that G2 is not just like suddenly getting a large win streak, but continuously improving even amongst games where it seems they're either not taking it seriously or not fully seriously. Between the two games, it doesn't seem like it matters very much because they're not actually letting go of anything. I do also want to point out that like the Buffalos have been slightly disappointing from their Rumble stage performance. They are showing some nice gap. They're like moments here and there, but this was to be expected. They're not going to be the strongest representatives out of the region, which is fine to be saying, but I was expecting a little bit more oomph, and the Talons have yet to really show anything worth noting. Like, cool, they're now more consistent in the game, but they're still not playing early game as well as they need to. Their late game play doesn't reflect anything from their setup. Unified seems to be a lot more comfortable now, but that doesn't stop the fact that this team as a whole hasn't gone anywhere. And Evil Geniuses are leveling up for whatever the fuck that means. It's kind of hard to really believe that Evil Geniuses are leveling up when the Buffalos are letting down a lot of what's going on and the Talons aren't really showing up overall. But hopefully we get to see a lot more from them. The Royals, however, are proving that there may not be an early game team, but they definitely can hold out long enough to get to the point where they need to be. And I think that's a lot better than when they used to just let themselves get 2K deficits. It looks like they've learned the 2K deficits from when they were playing in the LPL. Not good. Not in this scenario. And they've gotten away with being able to play the early game against teams that can't compete. But you saw here that against teams that are really showing up and not letting them get away with like passively going forth, at least in terms of playing against like the other three contenders, because the Buffalos hasn't played them again, and the Talons really again didn't show up. It like the Royals haven't shown me convincingly that they can play early game, but they've also shown me that they're no longer going to, against proper competition, just let themselves get deficits in a way that's like detrimental. But like a lot of our expectations are kind of shooken up on this situation. Sure, a lot of people might have been like, yo, G2 is just going to ride the hype, keep the win streak going, but let's be realistic here. If I was to look at this and see that RNG with virtually the same roster coming back to defend their title off of games where they've played against a lot of early games and have strong late game play, and T1 who have been virtually undefeated throughout the spring split, losing only one game during their playoff runs on an early game play, I wouldn't have put G2 as the favorite of this tournament, and yet they keep adding more flexible options. And RNG, for their part, I would have said maybe a contender, but at this point, they're solidifying that they have in terms of second, maybe first place to contest. Now, these are best of one scenarios. Best of ones are a little bit more volatile, and an analysis like this is hard to really catch out, right? Like T1 isn't like lossless. They lost some individual games. Just they win series primarily. They're a series team. RNG for their part did lose series. G2 on their part massively lost their first best of 5 and were by far not the favorites of their region. So as we move forward and knowing for sure that like it seems like the top 4 at this moment, because they're best of ones, round 2 has not even started, round 1 is not even done, that the top 4 aims to be, G2, RNG, T1, EG, the best of 5 should still be in the back of people's mind when it comes to this. Just looking back also in terms of like the picks, it seems that it's still the top 5 are still the top 5, right? And Lucian continues to be permabanned. And I wonder who's the first team that's going to take the risk at letting it go through. I wonder. I don't think it's going to happen, but I do want to note that it seems like we're coming to a stop where like the meta itself is pretty stable, but the meta itself is primarily around mid jungle, with some flexibility in the top side, while the bot side has had a lot of variety in terms of their picks, and that's pretty nice, honestly. Not much more from that. If anything happens at the end of round 2 and at the end of round 1 and the start of round 2 tomorrow, we'll probably get a lot of really nice things to see. But those are my thoughts, right? Oh, nice things to see, as in like I imagine somebody's got a pocket pick somewhere that could probably like disrupt the way that the top side of the map is drafted. But those are my thoughts. I want to hear what you guys think down below. Have you completely like lost faith in T1? Or are you like, no, this is just best of 1 formats. A lot of teams tend to like fluke on the best of ones, and like it doesn't usually generate the same kind of like thought process. Or are you like, no, T1's over. It's the era of G2. Hype train along the way. Choo choo, motherfuckers. I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. And if you like this kind of content, leave a like and subscribe. All of the good stuff. And thank you again for all of you who continue to watch. I super appreciate it. A lot of the support recently has been huge. I thank you very much with everything. Tomorrow's video should come out a little bit earlier than today's. Probably closer to when the a couple hours after the actual games happen, but we'll see. But I will definitely see you all tomorrow. And with that, have a good one.